Lady Decker frowned as her granddaughter hit the floor with a resounding thump. Her glass shattered into tiny shards among the designer rug, the bubble bourbon soaking into the 1,000-thread count, and the burning smell of liquor making her stomach turn even more. Lady Decker sighed in annoyance, rubbing her brow as if she was already disgusted with such theatrics. But Lynette didn't care. For years she had worked to build herself a presence and a title all on her own, and for the past year she had been under the impression that she'd be the sole force in her life. While she was never opposed to marriage, she wanted to choose it of her own volition. However, this marriage was like a slap to the face, waking her out of the fever dream of success she had worked so hard to attain. Did her grandmother see her as so incompetent that she'd pick an absolute stranger from God knows where? There were plenty of other acceptable options, and with so many unknowns still floating around, the vagueness of the secrets, and her grandmother's so-called plan, the news had her head spinning in circles. "George!" Lady Decker instantly called out, a tiny old house elf puffing up out of thin air beside her. "See to Lynette for a moment. I think she needs some time to process the news," she said casually. "George will do his best, Lady Decker." Before disappearing and reappearing with a tray of coffee, cream, and a cold cloth for Lynn's head, she abruptly pulled herself up, a new feeling swelling in her chest before she could stop it. She burst open the parlour doors, and the loud, reverberating slam caused her grandmother to flinch. George almost dropped the silver tray with nervous, shaky hands. "Lynette Rose, get back here this instant!" Her grandmother called, but it was useless. She was already stomping down the halls, ignoring the judgmental looks of the enchanted portraits of past club members, hearing their whispers and feeling their looks of shock and curiosity. It wasn't every day she lost her calm, collected self, but this was a special occasion. She approached the entrance to Marksman Hall, the sage-green French doors slightly ajar. She could hear the muffled talking of her target inside. She gripped the worn brass handles and yanked them open harshly, and the heavy wood groaned in protest. She stepped into the grand hall. The walls that weren't graced with massive floor-to-ceiling windows were littered with ribbons and banners of the accomplished duelists who had made their mark in this building. The crystal chandeliers above illuminated the hall and foremost stage, giving it a proud look. On that stage, looking far too comfortable, was he, her so-called future husband, waltzing around like he owned this place. "Ah, lovely of you to join us, Miss Choate. I was worried you'd be down and out after receiving the news." Sebastian called out from the main stage, a smug expression on his face. His hands were in his jacket pockets as he stood beside a bewildered-looking Rebecca. "You! We need to have words," Lynette managed to choke out. "Me?" He smirked. "No, the other cocky wizard on stage. Of course you. I'll explain shortly, Rebecca, but I need a moment. With Mr. Sallow." She barked out her words harshly, her throat tight as her gut burned with barely contained rage. Rebecca eyed the two, having an all-out stare-down before sighing and apparating into the air, most likely not far out of earshot. "Cocky, Now, is that any way to speak to your fiancé?" He walked away, ignoring her glares as he took in the space around him. "I shall speak as I see fit. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know what kind of deal you made with grandmother, but rest assured, I will find out," Lynette threatened. He raised his eyebrows as if her warning held zero weight. "Demanding, aren't we?" He chuckled. "Your grandmother said you had a flair for the dramatic on and off stage." He paused, a devious smile spreading across his face. "I wonder where else that passion is present," he mused lewdly. Lynette scoffed, making a strangled sound in the back of her throat. Her cheeks heated as she caught his innuendo. He attempted to ruffle her feathers, but she wouldn't allow it. "If that is your ridiculous way of wooing a girl, you're wretched at it." She hissed out, Her blood boiled just under the surface of her skin, which turned a shade of rose. He hopped off the stage with all the grace of a stag and came closer until they were toe to toe. Up close, he was taller, perhaps 6'2" or 3. He looked down, that smirk still present, and his eyes narrowed as he observed her up close, but she stood her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. Where I've been for the past 5 months, sweetheart, playing Prince Charming wasn't in the cards. I owe a lot to your grandmother, so I suggest you make this easy on both of us and accept what has transpired. He talked to her as if he was speaking to a petulant child, which only served to piss her off more. You are delusional if you think I'll take this just lying down. This is my birthright, and I refuse to let some nowhere mystery jeweler just saunter in and rip it away from me. There was another pause from him, and he blinked a few times before responding. Well, you don't have to take it lying down. There are plenty of other ways too. She drew her wand, suddenly holding it to his throat. One more word, and I swear I won't hesitate to hex you. He smiled lopsidedly, unfazed by her threat. Is that a promise, love? You can bet every dragget in my dowry it is, she growled, pushing the wand harder into his freckled skin. You know, despite your stubbornness to accept what is, I must say you're quite cute when you make such threats. He said cheekily, but with a hint of malice it seemed, and then somehow his smile grew. That blasted dimple made its reappearance. I say we settle this little spat with a little test of will. Me versus you, on this stage, right now. Lynette inhaled, ready to deny him at once, but she thought about it momentarily, her wand still pressed to the Adam's apple of his throat. If anything, it would put this smug bastard in his place, she thought, then gave a stern nod. I guess a proper welcome to the WW is in order. Maybe it will teach you how to behave before the season begins. She ripped her wand away from his neck. As she said that, a strange look passed over his face, but he quickly schooled himself before hopping back on stage. A proper welcome indeed, he said, holding out his broad, calloused hand. She didn't take it, coming up on the stage alone and walking to the other end. He gave a soft chuckle and took his place on the opposing side. I hope you're ready, little dove. Let's see what you've got. He chucked his jacket off and tossed it off stage haphazardly. He wore a wand holster underneath and slid it from its leather confinement. That's when she felt that unmistakable charge in the air. She froze in place, for in his hand he held not just a wand. He held one of her family's deepest secrets with ease as though it were nothing. The colour drained from her face as he smirked at her boldly. What's wrong, little dove? You look a little pale. See something familiar? A ghost, perhaps? He said with a chuckle. She couldn't find it in her to respond. He held one of the 3 wands of war, the wand of ambition. Few in her own family had ever managed to accomplish such a feat, and only one other outside of her Choate bloodline had ever managed to wield one of the great 3, Lady Decker herself. Even from the distance she was at, she felt its overwhelming aura from here. 11 inches, dark-stained American hawthorn with a snallygaster heartstring core. Its rare red moonstone at the hilt made the wand unique, offering its chosen wielder an immense advantage in duels where the wand holder felt driven. Where did you get that? She whispered, already knowing the answer. Suddenly, knowing why her grandmother had chosen him, for he wasn't just some random nobody, no, for one of the great 3 had chosen him as its wielder, something Lynette had not accomplished yet, the singular blemish on her otherwise spotless qualifications as heiress. Where did you get that? She whispered, already knowing the answer. Suddenly, knowing why her grandmother had chosen him, for he wasn't just some random nobody, no, for one of the great 3 had chosen him as its wielder, something Lynette had not accomplished yet, the singular blemish on her otherwise spotless qualifications as heiress. A wave of nausea and rage swept over her, but he remained calm and poised. His wand was pointed before him, now in the starting stance, that infuriating smile still plastered across his devilish features. She realised he hadn't answered her, no matter, she thought. Wand or no wand, I will put you in your place. Mr. Sallow.